Well, good morning. So, welcome to class. So, for those of you who have not been here for a while, I am trying to get through 3 chapters a week. I know, if you have goals, you shoot for the stars, you'll hit the moon, right? Well, we'll see what we do today. I think kind of my goal here is that the Old Testament is really cool. If you crack open Numbers and you start reading lists of cattle and oxen and descendants, you might seem to think that the whole Old Testament is that. No, it's not true at all. 99% of the Old Testament is fascinating. It's history, it is poetry, it is wisdom. There's a lot to it that, and there was already a yawn, I think. So, that's how it goes. Well timed, ma'am, well timed. That was perfect. I did. Well, we're 2 minutes in, and this is exactly how it goes. Well,
It's like one of your normal lectures. Huh?
That's exactly, except it's more audible. So thank you for that.
That's your resilience.
That's right. Well, let's go ahead and jump right into reading the Word. And if I could get a volunteer, we're just going to start with 2 Samuel 4, verses 1 to the end, it's fairly short. It's 1 to 12. Who would like to do that for me
I'll
today?
do that one.
Thank you, sir.
I don't want one of those 56ers.
So they're coming. So yeah, you better jump on this.
Oh, great. It starts right off here. When Ishbosheth, goodness,
There's balance to the universe, Steve.
Saul's son, heard about Abner's death at Hebron, he lost all courage and all Israel became paralyzed with fear. Now there were 2 brothers, Benah and Rechab, who were captains in Ishbosheth's raiding parties. They were sons of Rimmon, a member of the tribe of Benjamin, who lived in Beeroth. The town of Beeroth is now part of Benjamin's territory because the original people of Beeroth fled to Gittim, where they still live as foreigners. Saul's son Jonathan had a son named Mephibosheth, who was crippled as a child. He was 5 years old when the report came from Jezreel that Saul and Jonathan had been killed in battle. When the child's nurse heard the news, she picked him up and fled, but as she hurried away, she dropped him and he became crippled. Guess that's not funny. One day, Rechab and Benah, the sons of Rimmon and Beeroth, went to Ishbosheth's house around noon as he was taking his midday rest. The doorkeeper, who had been sifting wheat, became drowsy and fell asleep. So Rechab and Benah slipped past her. They went into the house and found Ishbosheth sleeping on his bed. They struck and killed him and cut off his head. Then, taking his head with them, they fled across the Jordan Valley through the night. When they arrived at Hebron, they presented Ishbosheth's head to David. "Look," they exclaimed to the king, "here's the head of Ishbosheth, the son of your enemy Saul, who tried to kill you. Today the Lord has given my lord, the king, revenge on Saul and his entire family." But David said to Rechab and Benah, "The Lord who saves me from all my enemies is my witness. Someone once told me Saul is dead, thinking he was bringing me good news, but I seized him and killed him at Ziklag. That's the reward I gave to him for his news. How much more should I reward evil men who have killed an innocent man in his own house and on his own bed? Shouldn't I hold you responsible for his blood and rid the earth of you?" So David ordered his young men to kill them, and they did. They cut off their hands and feet and hung their bodies beside the pool of Hebron. Then they took Ishbosheth's head and buried it in Abner's tomb in Hebron.
Thank you very much. Good job. Good job out of you, dude. Come on, you're like, this will be short, this will be sweet. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
How did we get here? Let's do a quick recap. I usually do that at the beginning. What has happened in the first 3 chapters of 2 Samuel? Don't be shy.
They've got to scramble for power in
Yes.
the vacuum of Saul's death.
Perfect. Yep, that's exactly it. So Saul is who, or was who?
Former first king of Israel.
Exactly. First anointed king of Israel. There was a man who declared himself king of Israel during the period of the judges. He was not anointed by God. He was a thug, and he was quickly dispatched. Saul was the first anointed. And when I say anointed, what does anointed mean?
Appointed by God.
Appointed by God. And anoint, what does anoint mean? Does anyone know? I've talked a little bit about what the root of the word anoint means. Our MCAT scholar is going to tell me what that means. No, I'm sorry, I'm kidding. I'm putting you on the spot. She's like, oh crap, I have to say something. Does anyone remember what anointing means?
It has something to do with the oil.
See, I knew she would do it. She's so brilliant. This is what I'm talking about.
What'd you say?
It means to anoint with oil. Actually, in Greek, chreo, which is where we get Christ, means to smear with fat or oil. And what it means is you take holy and pure oil, and you would pour it on the head, or you would mark it on the forehead. The point is that you are designating something as holy and consecrated by God himself. And in this case, that's exactly what happened. Samuel, the last judge of Israel, anoints first Saul, a farmer from obscurity, to be the first king of Israel by God's command. And only later, after Saul screws everything up, as God expected he would do, God decides to anoint a second person as king of Israel, the ruddy runt of a son of a man named Jesse from Bethlehem, who is David. And now Saul, in the very end of 1 Samuel, has died at his own hand, fighting the Philistines. He has lost the war. His sons, almost all of his sons are killed. The Philistines are closing in around him. He decides to take his own life. And in so doing, David is now the sole anointed king of Israel. However, being anointed by God is sometimes a very different thing as being acknowledged by other human beings. As soon as Saul dies, it turns out he has a couple of heirs left. One is his own son, Ishbosheth. Now, I'm going to say this really quick, and again, if you're in my class, and a yawn moment is coming again, I am convinced of it, is that the writers of the Old Testament sometimes go to great lengths to not be what they perceive as unholy. What do I mean by that? Well, in the case of Matthew, a pious Jew, goes to great lengths not to even mention the word God or the Lord. He will use the Greek terms for pronouns and just leave it at that. And you have to understand he's talking about God, because he doesn't even want to mention the word God. In the case of the Old Testament, the writer of 2 Samuel is going to great lengths to make sure that you know that the sons and grandsons of Saul are not related to a pagan god named Baal. Now, Baal is the Chaldean or Aramaic term for Lord. Okay? It means God or Lord. Now, it's a proper term. It means what you think it means. It means Lord, Master, Ruler. But it also came to mean the name of a pagan god named Baal, or Beelzebub. We all remember that, right? There was Baal worship in the Old Testament. It was a horrible practice. The actual names of these kids are probably Ishbaal and Meribbaal. However, the author of 2 Samuel wants to make sure we're not talking about either pagan gods or people who worship pagan gods. So he has changed the names of Ishbaal to Ishbosheth, and the name of Meribbaal to Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth. As it turns out, Ishbosheth is one of the direct sons of Saul. What does that make him now that Saul's dead?
Next in line.
King. Because that's how it works in antiquity. Remember, folks, we're talking about antiquity. And remember how we got here, too, is the people of Israel cried out for a king because they saw their neighbors as having kings or pharaohs or rulers. And they thought that their countries were being run great. Everything is great in Egypt because they got a pharaoh. Things suck in Israel. They're terrible. People are hiding in caves. There's no literacy. Our agriculture is terrible, and we're constantly being attacked by our enemies. And there's no artisan class. We'll talk about that in a minute. There's no great culture. There's no great learning. People are literally hanging on by a thread. They're like, well, Egypt is great, dude. They got plenty to eat. They got more than enough to eat. They've got a strong military. No one beats up on Egypt. At least they think that no one beats up on Egypt. They think that everything is stable. Everything is not really stable. But that's the idea. And they're like, if we have a king, things are going to be great for us. One of the things that comes along with being a king in this period is it's not election. It's not vote for the most popular guy and he becomes the next king. It's all about a dynasty. The ruler is now the king, and his house, meaning his dynasty or his family, will rule as king until there's no family left. And you can start to see how a lot of problems happen when kings die without leaving a successor. A direct male descendant is almost always a male. Who could take over in their place? If there was no direct descendant or son of the king, then someone else, like a cousin, a family member, might try and usurp the throne. In this case, it seems Ishbosheth. Remember, who is probably going to be the next king of Israel if nothing else changed? If it wasn't Saul after Saul?
Ishbosheth.
Well, Jonathan would have been if he weren't killed.
I think that the idea is that Jonathan was the successor. Jonathan, who was the best friend of David. Son of Saul, but also David loved Jonathan and vice versa. Jonathan is killed on the battlefield in the end of 1 Samuel, and he's dead. It would have been Jonathan. It would have been the other two sons as well. We're down now to Ishbosheth, and I think you can imagine that Ishbosheth, the way that the text refers to him, is either very young or very weak, not very powerful. Someone was controlling him like a puppet. Do you remember what his name was? And he died in the last one.
Is that Abner?
Abner. Abner was a general. This is very common, folks, in antiquity. Someone who was like a tutor to the young king might start acting like the king. This happened in the time of King Tut. King Tut was probably only 12 or 13 when he died. He was younger than that when he started to rule. He wasn't in charge, folks. Tutankhamun was not in charge. His master was in charge. The guy who was tutoring him was in charge, and he ran the country. And in fact, after Tutankhamun died, he was king, and there's art, and I'm going off on a tangent. You don't even care about this. If you go to the temples of Egypt, you will find the ones that have not been wiped out, because there's a lot of controversy associated with Tutankhamun. You can find art, temple art, that shows the vizier or the master, the tutor of Tutankhamun wearing the crown of the pharaoh of Egypt. He was in charge, folks. Make no mistake about it. Abner was a general. Who was in charge in antiquity? The guy with the biggest stick. The guy with the biggest stick and the most money, and usually the same. Abner was absolutely ruling. And as soon as Saul dies, there is a power struggle here. Does that sound familiar? In our modern age? Always a power struggle, folks. And what ends up happening is, long story short, Abner is dead. Abner is killed. David's not very happy about it. David certainly didn't want that to happen. But Abner is killed. As soon as Abner is killed, what happens to Ishbosheth? In chapter 4. He's got no protection anymore, does he? And the wolves are circling. The wolves are circling.
Well, he's weak.
Yeah.
That's his problem.
Yeah.
He's weak and timid and
Yeah.
didn't take charge,
Mm-hmm.
so he was an easy target.
And I want to talk too about where we're at from okay, so imagine, we're going to talk about this in a minute. Imagine the kingdom of Israel. Remember, I usually draw this. Mediterranean, you have Israel. In the south, you have two tribes. What are the two tribes of the south called? You should know this.
Judah.
Judah and the little one. Benjamin. See, you guys know this. Two tribes of the south that they call themselves the nation of Judah, or Judah, the region of Judah. And then the north, which is called what?
Israel.
Israel. It's confusing, but Israel. 10 tribes of the north. What has happened here in the beginning of 2 Samuel is there has already been a split. You can see it. You can read it. That the people of the north seem to regard the descendants of Saul as the rightful heirs of ruling the entire country. But the people of the south, the people of Judah, regard who is their king?
David.
So here, folks, you see in our timeline, 2000 BC, this is the era of the patriarchs. 1000 BC, this is where we're at now. In just a few years, we will have a united monarchy. But that will only last for 2 generations. This is the united monarchy. Who, and really, I would say 3. I guess you could probably say there was 3 generations. 3 generations there is a united monarchy. Mean, in some sense, all of the tribes, all 12 tribes of Israel, are being ruled by the same person. Who are the three kings who ruled a united monarchy in Israel?
Saul, David, and Solomon.
See, you got it. Saul, see, it rolls right off the tongue. Saul, David, and Solomon. That lasts until Solomon dies, and then you have a split. And for the next, and really, until 722 and 586, until 722, Israel and Judah are two separate kingdoms with two separate kings. In 722, Israel falls by the Assyrians. In 586, Judah falls to the Babylonians. So really, this idea of a united monarchy does not last very long in the grand scheme of things. You have three kings who rule a united monarchy, and then you have something like 24 that rule a divided monarchy. But you can see here, even before David even gets going, it's already divided. It's already divided. Why, and Mephibosheth, let's talk about him for a minute. He's Jonathan's son, so that makes him what relation to Saul?
His grandson.
It's his grandson. Should Mephibosheth be considered as an heir, rightful heir to the throne?
I think so.
Absolutely. He's his grandson. Why does the author talk about Mephibosheth as being crippled? What's the point?
Not fit for duty.
That is 100% it. That is exactly it. The author wants to make sure you know there's a reason why Mephibosheth was never put on the throne. Not only that, it's hard to say his name. He's not fit to be king. Remember, look, this, you may not see this as fair. This is not our judgment. This is the judgment of people 3,000 years ago. If you're lame, meaning you have a physical deformity, mental handicap, you're not fit to be king. Why?
You can't go warring.
You can't go warring. The number one thing a king does is ride out into battle. Now, a lot of kings will end up sitting back on the throne, pretending that they're going out to battle. Saul kind of did this. But in general, you were expected to lead your army. You were the number one warrior. But also, remember too, it was also a sign of you were a symbol of the nation, and the nation wanted a perfect human on that throne who was flawless. What else do you take from this short passage here? And also, I want to say this too. The assassination of Ishbosheth is actually very common in Middle Ages art. So if you go to the great museums of the world, the art museums of the world, and you go to the Middle Ages art, painting collection. I don't know how many of you do. I love it. I sit there and I could look for hours at this stuff, and you guys are probably like, this sucks. I don't know. I think it's great. Okay. But you will see a lot of art about this. This was a big topic in the Middle Ages. Why do you think this was a big topic in the Middle Ages?
Art?
No, the assassination of Ishbosheth. What does that tell you about the Middle Ages and what they were thinking or afraid of?
Well, it was a pretty violent time.
Yeah.
And they were constantly whacking each other off just like that, I guess.
You never knew who was going to be coming for you next. I think art reflects the concerns and anxieties of the period. You are probably like, I had no idea we were going to talk about this stuff today. This is way, look, you're not coming back, I get it. But I want to talk about David's response. Again, David shows a response that you may not have been expecting here. What did David do when he found out that assassins had killed the, quote, rightful, in the human's eyes, rightful heir of Saul?
He was mad, wasn't he?
He was mad.
Or at least feigned to be mad.
Ah, that's good, I like that.
I think it was more of an act. I mean,
What?
He did it to, show how angry he was to the followers of that particular part of Israel or God's people, so that they would rally behind him and not split the kingdom again.
What do you know about David? Tactfully, psychologically.
Very cunning.
Strategic.
Very cunning, strategic. Long-term thinker here. This is hard for people to do, think strategically.
Plus, it also shows that David's like, this is not acceptable and will not happen.
And then what?
A little self-serving.
That's
Yes.
it. I don't want my, stomach stabbed in the night by one of you people. I'm going to make an example here. But and I think cynically that's true. I also think I'm naive. Like I'm naive. And I like to believe the best in people. I do believe that part of it too was that David truly believed that the institution of the kingship was God's and God's alone to decide what to do with. I think when you see him having the opportunity several times to kill Saul, and he didn't, he could have, and to the cunning point, he could have spun that 100 different ways and been okay with it. All right, even his closest advisor said, "You should kill Saul. You have the opportunity. You could sneak into his camp tonight and cut the guy's head off," and he didn't. I think there is something to that. What do you think? Am I wrong? Tell me. I can be wrong.
I think he had to have gotten his man after God's heart title somehow. I mean, he's not just a, adulterer, and he's not just that. There's have to be other parts of him, so there have to be redeeming qualities.
I like that. Okay. Well,
I'm late
I'm
late to the conversation, but David did a bunch of goofy stuff and dumb things and stuff that we would consider against God, against his will. And yet he's still, every time, I look at my life and go, there's a list, there's a pile of garbage, but I still trust him. I still follow. I still, do my best. It's not about trying to act the part, because I spent many years acting the part. Trying to prove to everybody that I was that man after God's heart. And half the time I'm not.
Okay.
But it could still be said of me that I am, overall, generally speaking.
And how would you classify yourself or others as someone after God's own heart?
Coming back to it, allowing his grace to flourish in my life, I guess.
Okay. What else? This is important, and I think if anyone ever does watch this video, or you have the opportunity to tell others, what does it mean to be someone after God's own heart? What would you tell them?
Just trust in him completely. Regardless of your outward circumstances and where you are, that God's got it.
No matter.
There's just a sense of, joy.
Okay.
That comes out of that.
Okay.
I'd say accepting his forgiveness for what it is, and allowing myself then to continue to live instead of just piling on the shame. And putting on the fig leaf. And going and hiding.
I love it.
It is what it is. He's forgiven us. Accept it or not.
I'll cheat and use Jesus' words. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness.
I love it.
Yeah, I think he always did try. Okay, maybe not always. He's human, so he tried to seek God's counsel in his actions, I think, in most cases.
How many of us can derive true inner peace from whoever has been elected the leader of our government? Tell me. Bless your heart. You can derive true peace from who has been elected.
I have been, I've been under bad leaders, I've been under good leaders, and you just have to accept the good along with the bad and just know.
I see where you're going with this. It's not the leader, it's the fact that you have peace no matter who is elected. I
haven't always been like that.
Yep, okay.
But I think more today.
Okay.
I was just telling Kara, she's like, which way do you think it's going to go? I'm like, either way, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's going to be Trump, it's going to be Biden, and I've served under both. So I could really easily get myself wrapped around the axle and get excited about where the direction of the country's going. But the fact of the matter is, we have no control over that. And you just have to let it go and just know that God's got this. God put Pontius Pilate in charge. He had the authority to take his life or not take his life.
How many of you have true inner peace because you know you're a cosmic accident?
How what?
You're just an accident, Lorna.
Well, I'm a Gemini, so.
Thank you. I love that. That's good. And I'm an Aquarius or a Pisces, depending on which newspaper I read. No, I'm serious. You know, the universe just happened to exist. All of you are not special. The earth is nothing special. You're just an accident. You're just existing. Only natural forces govern our existence, and one day you will cease to exist, and that's the end of it. How many of you draw total solace from that? See how
Zero.
sarcastic I am when I say
Zero. You know, I was just talking with my daughter the other day. I said, you know what? How bad do we feel for those people that don't have God, that don't have some foundation to like weigh everything against?
That's it.
If everything's just willy-nilly, whatever, it doesn't matter. There is no God. There's no moral truth. There's no right and wrong. How miserable of a life.
Yep.
Just making your own way. Just.
Well, my dad was in World War II, and he said, you give the enemy an inch, they'll take a mile.
Yep.
And I believe that's true, and I believe that's what's happened in our country. But the enemy, I think, is within. There's a saying, you know, Russia said they could take over the United States without firing a shot.
I was thinking
They
this
said
past
it couldn't
week.
couldn't be taken from the outside, only from the in.
I want to expand on what you're saying, Laura, and I'm not going to go down this path. Look, the only thing I want to say is it's true. If you look back at the history of the United States, again, the world has always been corrupt. So make no mistake about it, it's not like all of a sudden it's corrupt now. You know, if you look at the history of the United States and its Cold War, for those of you who are old enough to remember all of that, who was the number one enemy of the people of the United States from roughly 1945 to 1991?
Russia.
The Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union collapsed in the early 1990s, who became the number one enemy of the United States? You will find human psychology to be as predictable as the universe and the planets that orbit the sun. Without a common enemy, we will find a common enemy. And who becomes the common enemy in the late 1990s until the modern time?
We shifted to the Middle East.
We'll find someone, but I would even argue that even that is not as big of an enemy now as what Lorna is getting at. Who is the biggest enemy to you when you sign on to Facebook in the morning? Is it the Middle East? Is it Russia? Who is it?
Internally, others.
Your own
Internal battle.
people.
You want names?
No.
Yeah.
Your own people. You will find an enemy, folks.
When-
And it might be from within. The New Testament, folks, probably the second half of the New Testament, the Catholic epistles, you would call them, the pastoral epistles of Paul, are all about taking guard against the wolf that is in sheep's clothing within your own midst. That is your biggest enemy to the New Testament church. That's our biggest enemy. The people who parade around, pretend, and again, we're going way off on tangent here, but it's important. We have to watch out for the people who masquerade as beings of light.
I know who it was now,
Yes.
that young guy, that Paul,
Timothy?
huh?
Timothy?
Timothy, yeah, that's who it was. Somebody was instructing Timothy, was it Paul? Instructing him, telling him to stay strong,
Yeah.
because there would be people come in
Yeah.
to the church, cause trouble.
Yeah.
I can't think
Let's-
how it's worded.
I think it's easy to, like I was saying before, get wrapped around the axle. You look at the debt that we have. You look at the impending doom, you got the biggest cyber attack that happened, and they think it was Russia that did it. And how much information did they get? We don't know.
Yeah,
We have all this stuff that's pulling and vying for our attention, and really they're just all big distractions. And did you hear what happened now? And it's just like, you can wear yourself out thinking that, man, this is the end, this is the beginning of the end. And the fact of the matter is, we've been at the end of times since for 2,000 years.
Right.
And that's why I said, where is your trust? If you're gonna trust in the government to save you, you better keep looking.
How many hours a day do you spend reading
Yeah.
the Word of God?
Yeah.
How many? Tell me. Average.
Less than an hour. Less than.
Less than an hour? That's pretty good. If that's the real answer, Angela, it's pretty darn good. How about a week? How many hours per week do you spend reading the Word of God? Not including this class. Bless your hearts. How many hours a week do you spend on social media? Consuming garbage. How many hours a week do you spend, whatever news media outlet you want, I will not name names, consuming garbage? I think, folks, you can tell a tree by its fruit, and you will become what you are immersed in. This is the baptizo. You are baptized. You are a cucumber that is soaking in vinegar and salt and sugar. What do you become?
Pickle.
A pickle. Whatever you are pickled in is what you become. If you immerse yourself in the Holy Scriptures, you will understand righteousness and have true peace. If you baptize yourself in garbage, you will become garbage, no matter how righteous you are. All right. Soapbox.